Epic Conquest X is dead. Not cancelled, not abandoned, but the game you were expecting to become Epic Conquest X isn't really Epic Conquest X anymore. The developers have gone back to the drawing board and are reworking the characters, the world, the gameplay, and even the identity of the project itself. And what came out of that? Conquest. But the most interesting part isn't actually the new name. It's why they decided they had to start over. If you've been following the development of Epic Conquest X, you probably know that this game has already been through a pretty long development period. For months, development was moving slowly, and instead of forcing themselves to keep pushing the project forward at the same pace, the team decided to step back. They played other games, they watched anime, they basically allowed themselves to become players again instead of constantly thinking like developers. And that might sound insignificant, but for a team that's been working on the same project for a long time, stepping away can sometimes be exactly what you need. Because eventually, something that's supposed to be a hobby can start feeling like a job. And apparently, that's exactly what happened with ECX. The developers realized that if they wanted to get their passion back, they couldn't simply keep patching and expanding the existing version of the game. They had to rethink the entire project. The characters, the world, the gameplay, the identity, basically, Conquest had to be rebuilt from the ground up. And that decision wasn't simply about making the game better. It was also about removing the pressure surrounding the name Epic Conquest. For years, Epic Conquest had built a reputation. If you see the words, Epic Conquest, you already have an idea of what you're getting. An action RPG. A story, characters, lore, a particular level of quality. And that's understandable. Epic Conquest built that reputation. But there's a downside to having a name that carries that much weight. Every new project automatically gets compared to everything that came before it. Every character gets compared to previous characters. Every gameplay system gets compared to EC1 and EC2. Every story decision gets judged against the expectations established by the previous games. And according to the developers, that pressure contributed to the team becoming stressed and burned out. So instead of trying to escape those expectations while still calling the game Epic Conquest X, they decided to do something much more radical. They changed the identity entirely. No more Epic Conquest X. No more trying to force the project into the same box. Instead, the developers wanted to approach game development from a much simpler perspective. Make games because you enjoy making games. And that's where the story of Conquest really begins. One of the strangest, and honestly funniest, parts of this entire transformation is what happened to the identity behind the project. The developers essentially reframed themselves as a bunch of unemployed people whose hobby happens to be making games. And somehow, the hobby makes money. It's a hilarious way to describe a development team. But underneath the joke is actually a pretty serious idea. They wanted to make games because they enjoyed making games. Not because they were trapped inside the expectations created by a previous success. And that's how we got RRADS. Now you might be wondering, what the hell is RRADS? Well, apparently, there isn't some massive corporate meaning behind it. The developers basically needed a name quickly. Ryua came up with the initials of the developers who happened to be in their Discord voice call at the time. And that's it, RRADS was born. Which is actually pretty fitting when you remember where the name Gakko came from. Gakko, in Javanese, can roughly be used in the sense of whatever, anything, or something along those lines. Basically, yeah, whatever, let's just go with that. And now RRADS carries that same spirit. No giant corporate identity, no complicated studio philosophy, just, let's make games and see where this goes. But there's an important distinction here. RRADS doesn't mean Gakko Games is disappearing. It doesn't mean Epic Conquest has been erased. And it doesn't mean everything associated with the old identity has been thrown away. Instead, the developers are separating the identities. Think of it like this. RRADS is the team developing Conquest. Gakko Games is still the publishing identity associated with the project. And that distinction becomes particularly important when we talk about the future mobile version. Conquest is currently being developed under this new team identity, but once the game eventually makes its way to mobile, it will still be published under Gakko Games. So Gakko isn't dead, it's simply no longer being treated as the identity that has to define every new game the developers create. And honestly, that separation might be one of the most important changes they've made. Because now the developers can experiment. They can try different gameplay systems, different characters, different worlds, different ideas, without every single decision automatically being interpreted as the next evolution of Epic Conquest. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. If Epic Conquest X isn't Epic Conquest X anymore, what exactly is Conquest? Conquest is the new title of the project formerly known as Epic Conquest X. But there's something extremely important to understand. This is not the finished game. In fact, the current version is basically a combat demo. That's it. No massive open world yet. No full story. No enormous roster of characters. No giant collection of weapons. No complete exploration system. The developers have essentially stripped the project down to its core. The action. You load in, you fight, and you experience the foundation of what Conquest is trying to become. And honestly, I think that's a pretty smart approach for this stage of development. Because if you're rebuilding a game from the ground up, there isn't much point pretending that everything is already finished. You need the foundation first. Does the combat feel good? Do the controls feel responsive? Does attacking feel satisfying? Do the weapons actually feel different? Does the player have enough freedom to make combat choices? Those are the questions this demo is trying to answer. And there's one thing I already know a lot of Epic Conquest fans are wondering about. Mobile. Epic Conquest has always been strongly associated with mobile gaming. So naturally, people are going to want to know whether Conquest is going to follow the same path. Right now, it isn't playable on mobile. The current demo is built for PC through WebGL. So if you try opening it on your phone and wonder why it isn't working, that's not a bug. Mobile simply isn't supported yet. However, mobile is still part of the plan. The developers have said they're working toward a mobile version, although their announcement jokingly described the timeline as something along the lines of a week, or more, usually more, which might honestly be the most accurate game development estimate ever. But the important part is that mobile hasn't been abandoned. It's still planned, and once Conquest is ready to make that transition, it will still be published under GCO Games. So for now, think of the current version as a prototype of the combat foundation, rather than a preview of the entire final game. And that distinction matters, because the developers aren't asking players to judge Conquest based on how much content it has right now. They're giving players a chance to judge the foundation, and that foundation is going to determine whether everything else works later. Because the plans for Conquest are much bigger than what we're currently seeing. So if the current version of Conquest is basically just combat, what happens later? Well, that's where things get interesting. The developers have already talked about several systems and features that are planned for the future. We're talking about village building, vast roaming areas, underground caves, tower dungeon exploration, character creation, new weapons, and even completely different weapon styles, including things like guns and gauntlets. That's a pretty significant departure from what many people originally imagined Epic Conquest X would become. And that's exactly why calling this project simply Epic Conquest X with a new name doesn't really work anymore. The philosophy has changed, the gameplay direction has changed, and potentially, the entire scope of the game has changed. One of the most interesting ideas is the focus on player choice and customization. Instead of simply controlling a predefined character with a predetermined identity, Conquest is moving toward systems that could allow players to customize their avatar, abilities, and combat style. That opens up a lot of possibilities. Imagine being able to build your character around completely different approaches to combat. Maybe you want a fast melee-focused setup. Maybe you want to use ranged weapons. Maybe you want to combine different skills. Maybe you want to experiment with weapons that simply wouldn't fit the traditional Epic Conquest formula. And then you combine that with exploration. Villages, dungeons, roaming fields, underground areas. Suddenly, Conquest starts sounding less like a sequel and more like a completely different RPG built from the ideas the developers wanted to explore. But there's also a reason why I think the current combat demo is important. All of those future systems are meaningless if the core gameplay isn't fun. You can build the biggest world imaginable. You can create dozens of weapons. You can add villages, dungeons, caves and customization. But if the actual moment-to-moment gameplay isn't satisfying, players aren't going to stay. That's why the combat foundation matters so much. The developers have an opportunity right now that becomes much harder later. They can experiment, They can break things. They can change mechanics. They can listen to feedback. They can completely rebuild systems before spending years building content around them. And that's exactly why players shouldn't look at this demo and say, "That's all." Instead, the better question is this foundation strong enough to build the rest of the game on? Because we're basically looking at the skeleton of Conquest, not the final body, and if the skeleton is good, there's a lot of room for this game to grow. But there's another question that needs to be answered. What happens to Epic Conquest itself? Because with the creation of Conquest, it's easy to assume that the original franchise is simply being abandoned. But that's not what's happening. According to the developers, Epic Conquest is essentially being put back into its original box. The name is being reserved for when the creator feels ready to write again. And right now, writing isn't really the priority. That's one of the biggest philosophical differences between Epic Conquest and Conquest. Epic Conquest has always been heavily tied to its narrative, its characters, its world, its lore, its story progression. Conquest is being designed with much more emphasis on gameplay, action, customization and player choice. That doesn't mean the developers suddenly hate story. It means they don't want every project to require the same kind of creative process. And honestly, that's probably healthier for everyone involved. Because if the developers aren't currently in the right place to write another massive narrative-driven RPG, forcing themselves to do it just because fans expect, the next Epic Conquest probably isn't going to produce the best game. But there is still some good news for existing Epic Conquest fans. Now that the Conquest team is in a more stable position, the developers have more time to return to Epic Conquest 1 and Epic Conquest 2. And interestingly, some of that work isn't even about new story content. There are still technical requirements that need to be addressed. Specifically, the games need another API update to remain compliant with Google's requirements for apps on the Play Store. So while the future of Epic Conquest isn't currently about immediately producing another massive story, there is still work happening behind the scenes. And I think that's important. Because the developers don't need to do everything simultaneously. They can maintain the existing games. They can work on Conquest. And eventually, when the creator actually feels ready to write again, Epic Conquest can return to the spotlight. That separation could actually benefit both projects. Epic Conquest can remain the home for the narrative-driven experience that fans already know. And Conquest can become the experimental playground where the developers can focus on gameplay and new ideas. Which brings us to what might be the biggest takeaway from this entire announcement. Conquest isn't just a name change. It's a change in philosophy. I think there's something bigger happening here than simply changing a game's name. Because Conquest isn't just Epic Conquest X with a different logo. The entire philosophy behind the project seems to have changed. Before, the team had the weight of Epic Conquest has to live up to Epic Conquest. Now the mindset is closer to let's make a game that we actually enjoy making. And that's a huge difference. When developers are enjoying the process of making a game, players can often feel it. And when developers are exhausted and simply trying to satisfy expectations, players can feel that too. So maybe stepping away from the Epic Conquest name was exactly what this project needed. Not because Epic Conquest was bad, not because ECX failed, but because Conquest needs room to become its own thing. And that's where I want to hear from you. If you followed Epic Conquest X before this announcement, would you rather the developers continue building ECX under the Epic Conquest name? Or would you rather they completely separate it and create something new like Conquest? There are arguments for both sides. The Epic Conquest name already has an established audience. It has recognition, it has history, it gives a new game an immediate connection to the existing fanbase. But the downside is that every new idea gets compared to EC1 and EC2. Starting fresh gives the developers much more freedom. They can experiment with custom avatars, skill customization, village building, new weapons, new exploration systems, and gameplay ideas that might not fit the traditional Epic Conquest formula. So personally, I think the reboot makes sense. But the real test is going to be what happens next. Right now, Conquest is still extremely early. The current demo is focused almost entirely on combat. Mobile isn't available yet, the larger world doesn't exist in its final form. The villages aren't fully implemented. The dungeons and caves aren't there yet, and we're still waiting to see how all these planned systems eventually connect. But that's also what makes this stage so interesting. We're watching a game being rebuilt from its foundation. And if you actually want to see what the developers have been working on, you can play the current gameplay demo yourself. It's available on itch.io for PC through WebGL. Just remember that this is an early development build. Don't go into it expecting the full Conquest experience. The purpose right now is to experience the combat foundation and provide feedback. And if you play it, actually give the developers feedback. Don't just say, looks good. Tell them what feels good. Tell them what feels bad. Tell them what feels responsive. Tell them what feels awkward. Because at this stage of development, detailed feedback can be incredibly valuable. And this is where I'm personally going to be watching Conquest very closely. Because the most important thing right now isn't how much content the game has. It's whether the foundation is strong enough to support everything that comes later. The combat needs to feel satisfying. The controls need to feel responsive. The avatar and weapon customization needs to eventually feel meaningful. And when village management, roaming fields, tower dungeons, underground caves and new weapon styles are eventually added, they need to complement the foundation rather than cover up problems underneath it. That's why I actually think this early demo is important. We're seeing the skeleton of the game, not the final body, and if that skeleton is solid, then Conquest has a lot of room to grow. But if the foundation isn't right, it's much better for the developers to discover that now than after years of building content around it. That's why player feedback matters so much at this stage. So let's summarize everything. Epic Conquest X has evolved into Conquest. The project is being rebuilt with a completely different identity and philosophy. The team behind Conquest is operating under RRADS Games. Gecko Games isn't disappearing. Epic Conquest isn't disappearing either. Epic Conquest 1 and Epic Conquest 2 can still receive updates, including the necessary Google Play API work. But Conquest itself is being treated as something new. Something focused more heavily on dynamic action, customization and player choice. And right now, we're only seeing the beginning. The current demo is essentially the combat foundation. There is no mobile version yet. There isn't a complete world. There isn't a full story. There isn't the complete collection of planned systems. And that's okay, because this isn't supposed to be the finished game. It's the starting point. Sometimes, starting over isn't failure. Sometimes it's how you finally get the opportunity to build the game you actually wanted to make. And that's why I'm genuinely interested to see where Conquest goes. Because if the developers can take this foundation and successfully build all those planned systems around it, we could eventually end up with something very different from what anyone originally expected from Epic Conquest X. And for Epic Conquest fans, that could be a good thing. So if you're an Epic Conquest fan, or you're simply interested in seeing what Conquest eventually becomes, subscribe to the channel. Because when this game starts getting more content, I'll be covering it. Guides, walkthroughs, gameplay, character and system breakdowns, news and updates, and eventually, the full Conquest experience when it makes its way onto mobile. I'm basically going to be your guy for Conquest coverage. So hit like if you're excited to see where this project goes. Drop a comment and tell me what you think about the reboot. Would you rather have Epic Conquest X or Conquest? And subscribe so you don't miss the next update. Also, come join our community on Discord. The link to my Discord server is down in the description. And if you haven't tried the demo yet, go play it. Test the combat, see what you think, then come back and tell me. Does Conquest actually have what it takes to become the next big game from the team? I'll see you in the next one.